Hello and welcome to Cycling Weekly's Tour of Flanders preview. I'm Oliver Bridgewood and I'm joined by news editor Vern Pitt and news writer Henry Robertshaw. The race is on Sunday, on the 2nd of April. It's 261 kilometres long. It's the second monument of the season and it goes from Antwerp in Belgium to Oudenaarde.
Oudenaarde, also in Belgium.
It's in Belgium. And it features 18 brutal bergs, or short climbs as they're known, and it finishes with the Eau de Quermont and the Paterberg. So before we get on to this year's race, the first thing I want to say is if you've got any questions or if you have a prediction of who you think's going to win, let us know in the comments and we'll try and read a few out later on. But before we get on to this year's race, what happened last year, guys?
Well, we were treated to a bit of a classic last year. Peter Sagan banging his first monument win after, well, years of not being able to do so.
Good adjective there, banging, like it.
Thanks. It was a really kind of a attacking race all over the place. On the last climb, Sagan was away with Sepp van Mark, dropped him. He had about, I think, 15 seconds at the top of that climb, at the top of the Paterberg. Van Mark teamed up with a firing Cancellara, who proceeded to chase him all the way to that place in Belgium that you were talking about earlier.
Oudenaarde.
But they couldn't catch him. And Sagan looked in impervious form that day.
It's a wheelie across the line.
Yes, he did. Yeah. That is true. The only sort of downside for the race, I think, was we were denied any kind of battle between Peter Sagan and Rik van Looy, who are often touted as the next kind of Cancellara Boonen kind of combo, because Van Looy, most of his team actually came off with about 100 kilometres to go, and broke his collarbone. So that was the only downside to the day. But it does mean that this year's edition should be pretty good, because Van Looy has been winning races left, right and centre, and so he'll be obviously keen to kind of put that record straight and go up against Sagan this weekend.
Anything you want to add on that from last year?
No, I think last year I was actually at the race and everyone there wanted to see Cancellara go out on a big high. Unfortunately it wasn't to be, but it was still a great performance. He was caught behind a little bit and then rode incredibly quickly on the Paterberg, caught Van Mark and then ran into Oudenaarde. And even though he didn't win, it was a great way to go out. It
was really close, nail-biter finish, wasn't it? That man-on-man battle that they had.
It was you were watching that clock pretty closely.
Yeah, it's good. And I think the thing I remember from last year was Ervetti from Movistar, who was in the break and then still managed to stay when they were caught and get a top 10.
Yeah, I think it's the best Spanish rider in the race since Fletcher quite a few years ago. So
and he doesn't look like he's not someone who you'd associate as being good in a race like Flanders. He's a bit more of a climber, isn't he? So
yeah,
right. Yeah, it was a great performance by him as well. There's lots of little stories in these.
Hopefully, we'll get the same again this year.
Yeah,
something
good. Yeah,
nice little tidbits.
So this year's race, there's a very stacked field. You know, who are the favourites? Who are the riders that are most likely to win?
Well, I think Vern, you've already picked up on this. Rik van Looy against Peter Sagan is the big face-off, really. Van Looy has had the better spring campaign, so he's won Gent-Wevelgem in E3 last weekend. He won Omloop at Nieuwsblad, and then Sagan won Brussels-Kern. But we're back in February now. And the recent form is definitely with Van Looy. He looked really strong in both races last weekend.
That's true, but you obviously can't ever count out Peter Sagan. He seems to be the kind of guy who can win bike races at will most of the year round. And who knows, he definitely would have been, well, one thinks he may well have been not holding back, but he would have been building to this. Yeah. So, ready to go.
After Gent-Wevelgem, he was quite annoyed, really. If you didn't see the race, basically what happened was Van Avermaet and Jens Keukeler, the Orica Scott rider, went away with about 15 kilometres to go from I think 5-6 man group, and Sagan was really annoyed with Quick-Step rider Nicky Terpstra, because Terpstra wasn't really cooperating in the chase because he didn't want to take Sagan with him, basically. And Sagan in his interviews after the finish was not happy about this. He was really quite annoyed, as he was annoyed at Kwiatkowski, similarly at Milan San Remo.
But I think Sagan is. I mean, this has happened to Sagan before. That kind of negative racing against him, where they mark him.
Yeah.
But he won when he won the Worlds in America, 2 years ago.
Yep.
He won the Worlds by predicting that people would race against him in that way. So he was like, right, I'm just going to drop everyone, and he planned that move to counter that. And it's a similar kind of thing he could potentially do here and just ride away from everyone.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not a million miles. Well, not a million miles away from what he did last year. In that I don't know I can't remember who instigated the move that he was originally in actually. But obviously, when he puts the hammer down, there's not very many people that can go with him. I think in what you saw last year is he kind of seemed to manage to break the cycle of all that negative racing that I think had been going on for a number of years against him, and starting with the World Championships the year before, and he's kind of suffered. He seems to have fallen back into suffering from that same problem this spring, but he knows how to, as you say, he knows how to kind of counter that, and
he can win in different ways.
He can win in multiple ways.
I think the big problem that Sagan will face is the strength of Quick-Step, and that they've got so many options that there'll always be a man who will be able to go with Sagan. If he tries to go a long way out, we've got the team, Quick-Step team here, and I just want to read this out because it's a pretty amazing team. Tom Boonen, obviously 3 times Flanders winner. Philippe Gilbert, who's looked in great form this spring, is won Tour of Flanders, second in E3, is currently winning the Panna as we speak. Ilio Kaiser, Yves Lampert, Zdenek Stybar, Niki Terpstra and Matteo Trentin. I mean, that's a hell of a team. That's a hell of a team.
It is a hell of a team if they can work together, though.
Yeah.
And what we've seen before with Quick-Step is they turn up with a really strong team and no out-and-out leader, and they kind of struggle to actually shape the race to their work because no one knows who's doing what.
That's an interesting point actually, because I was talking to Ian Stannard, the Skyrider, on Saturday before Gent-Wevelgem, and he was making the point that a lot of the attacks in the races this spring have been going for a long way out. So E3 went from like 80 kilometres to go. Het Nieuwsblad was a long way out as well. And what Stannard was saying was that he thinks this is down to the Quick-Step team, because the problem they've got is there are so many guys in there who are excellent riders that they think, if I don't attack now, then one of my teammates is going to attack. And then I'm going to be stuck in the peloton not being able to do anything about it. So what they're thinking is, well, if Niki Terpstra is thinking, well, Philippe Gilbert's going to attack on the next climb, so I've got to attack on this climb so I don't get stuck behind. So it'll be really interesting if they actually have a plan. Well, I'm sure they've got a plan, but if the riders stick to that plan and work as a team, or whether they get caught up trying to race against each other.
So you think that they have a flexible plan and that's their downfall? Is there a suggestion that there's multiple potential leaders and they see how the race pans out, so then they say, oh well, Gilbert's up the road, so he's the sort of de facto leader now, and everyone's going to try and help him. He's become the plan in this race. So
I think that's sort of what they've got to do. If they've got a rider up the road, whoever it is, they can't ride them down. So I think it sort of is whoever from Quick-Step.
Well, Steen Vandenberg's there, so that shouldn't happen this year.
Well, but yeah, I actually think, looking at that Quick-Step team, everyone's talking about Tom Boonen. Philippe Gilbert in great form. I think he could be a man to watch.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right there. I think he's the form man in that team, isn't he, right now? And if they've got any sense, they'll fall in line behind him. Yes, Tom Boonen is, the great champion that he is, but is he punchy enough to really kind of stick it to the likes of Peter Sagan, Greg van Avermaet, even my personal favourite Sepp Valmark, over one of those climbs?
But you talk about Gilbert,
yep.
Not a name that we've normally associated with the Tour of Flanders, more of an Ardennes Classics rider, so
I think.
What do you think about that?
I think that's partly Greg van Avermaet's fault. Obviously, they've been on the same team since 2012 at BMC, and then Gilbert has left this year. And the problem was at BMC, and both riders have said this themselves, is that Van Avermaet was slightly better at the cobbles and Gilbert was slightly better in the Ardennes. So they weren't racing against each other, they had to split them up. So Gilbert never really, while he was at BMC, he never got the opportunity to really go for the cobbles, and vice versa. Van Avermaet never got a chance to go at the Ardennes. So I know Gilbert, if you look back at his palmares, he's okay in the cobbles. So obviously hasn't got any massive wins. But I don't think we should look at his palmares and think, no, it's not for him. I think we need to judge him on how he's been racing this spring, which is really incredibly well.
No, I think that's a fair point.
And you mentioned Ian Stannard.
Yes.
Chatting to Stannard.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I mean, that we want to know about the British interest.
Well, yeah,
do we have a chance? Are there any British riders who can win? You know, how's Sky looking?
Well, you've got the big kind of Sky hopefuls, which are obviously Ian Stannard and Luke Rowe.
It's a question that's actually come in from Nick Langley as we're talking about this. Is saying, who do you think is the most likely to perform better, Stannard or Rowe? So Nick, we're on it. Go.
Okay,
go.
It's a good question, Nick. Who's more likely to perform better? Rowe has traditionally, I think, done a bit better in Flanders. He was 5th last year, I think. He was in like that chasing group behind Cancellara and Van Mark. I think he lost out in the sprint to, I'm going to say Christoph, but that might be wrong. But he hasn't looked quite as strong this year as he did previous years, I don't think. No, Stannard arguably has looked a bit stronger, but you tend to think of him as more of a, or I tend to think of him as more of a Roubaix guy than a Flanders guy.
Yeah, I think Rowe, he looked fairly good at E3. He just sort of, if you didn't see that race, Stannard punctured at a terrible place just as the race kicked off, which meant that Rowe was completely on his own, and then he just went with the wrong move, and these things happen. If you've got Philippe Gilbert and Boonen attacking one after the other, then you can't go with every single one. But again, for Evergum, he didn't look quite so good. He got dropped on a fairly innocuous bit of road, and then DNF'd. So I don't know. I'm not entirely sure whether he is in as good a form going into this Classics campaign as he was last time. So. But yeah, as I say, Flanders is the race for him, and I think Stannard is much more of a Roubaix man.
Just on the topic of Sky, if we're talking about Sky briefly, it's a kind of a shame in some respects, although totally understandable, that Kwiatkowski isn't going to be there, because he's previously done quite well there, I believe, if I recall. In like the moves with like Sagan and people at the front of the race before now. He's been in absolutely blistering form. Strada Bianchi, Milan San Remo, yeah.
It's a little race.
Yeah, it's just that minor race in Italy that no one really pays much attention to. You know, you'd think he'd be kind of a prime pick, but I'm assuming he's not there because he's going for the Ardennes later.
I think he's also got his feet up a little bit after hard training from Milan San Remo. And another Sky rider who's not there is Geraint Thomas, who, if you're one of the people who took odds on him at 20-1 yesterday to win Flanders, then I'm sorry he's not there. He's not racing, so
he was 12th last year, so yeah. he was up there.
Yeah, but obviously he's not. But Sky still have a really strong team.
They do have a good show.
Gianni Moscon is a really good young Italian rider who has had the worst fortune with crashes this season. Tirreno Adriatico, he had a really bad crash where his front wheel just collapsed in front of him. And then he crashed again at Ghent, and I was at the Sky bus at the end of the stage, and he had to be helped off his bike. He was really limping, he was really struggling, but I don't think there's anything bad, any bad injuries. He might be hurting a bit, but there's nothing too serious, so he'll be there to help. We obviously got guys like Christian Knaes as well. Owen Dahl, a young British rider who's only been in the team since the start of the year and is already riding Flanders.
He's got a bit of pedigree.
Teo's not doing it, no.
And Dahl said that he wants to do these kind of races on the road in the future, so no one expects him to be there in the final. It'll be interesting to see how he does, or how he sort of.
Well, yeah, he's done well in the under-23 Flanders in the past. John Dibben is another. He's not riding again, but he's done well, so maybe he's another one to look for the future. We've got another question coming in, which is, which climb is the most decisive in the race?
Well, that's a difficult one to pick. I mean, it's had in recent years has come down to those last two climbs. We've actually seen There has been moves.
So just to clarify, the last 2 climbs are the Eau de Quermont and the Paterberg.
Yes, that's right.
And they're both cobbled.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And they're both steep, the Paterberg particularly so. What was I going to say? It's come down to those kind of last 2 climbs and that sort of circuit being quite decisive. But we've actually seen moves go sort of just after them or in sort of fairly innocuous bits of road before now.
Yeah.
I think the year Christoph won, he went away sort of just after the climb, him and Terpstra.
Yeah.
Whilst last year you had the sort of battle between Sagan and Cancellara really shaped up on the climb, Sagan was in an earlier move which went away earlier, which arguably allowed him to rest up a little bit coming into that final climb.
I think if you're looking for to watch some TV and you might watch a Grand Tour stage and think, oh, there's the climb with 20k to go, I'll watch from there. Like, this is a sort of race where you really need to tune in much earlier. One climb that is returning to the race this year is the Muur van Gerasbergen, which, if you watch the Tour of Flanders in 2011 and before, was the crucial climb in the race. But in 2012 they changed the course to its current form with the Eau de Quermont, Paterberg as the crucial climbs. But the Muur is back this year. And
it's not going to be quite as decisive.
Not going to be quite as decisive, but it comes with 85 kilometres to go. And we have had moves in previous races this year going from a long way out. So if you're looking for somewhere to sort of think, yep, that's where I'll get back from my Sunday morning ride and tune in, the Kappelmoor with 85 kilometres to go is where the racing could really kick off. But from there, the races go to the Eau de Quermont with 45 kilometres to go, the Paterberg with 41 kilometres to go, and then probably the hardest climb of the race is the Koppenberg, which is an absolute brute of a climb.
What's it like to ride? I've ridden it.
I've ridden it as well, just about.
You guys can keep that. I'm not.
Have you ridden it?
No, don't.
It's absolutely savage. It's probably like 400 metres long, 25% gradients, and the cobbles are some of the worst on the course. And I think probably almost worse than the riding it is when you're riding into it. So you ride into it and the road is just flat, and then just rises up like an absolute wall in front of you. It's a completely brutal climb. And interestingly, there is rain forecast for Friday and Saturday.
That's going to make that kind of a climb very tricky.
Yeah. It might be okay on the rest of the course because there are sunny conditions for the day of the race, which means things could dry off. But the Koppenberg is covered with trees, and if the sun can't get to that, there's a little bit of moss in the cobbles as well.
Yeah.
So we could see riders walking up that, I think.
Slippy cobbles are not much fun.
Yeah, I mean, Google images of the Koppenberg and it will throw up images from every single year of this race of riders walking up it. Yeah. So it's a completely brutal climb. That comes with 35 kilometres to go and could again be a very decisive point.
If we're mentioning the weather, we should also mention the other thing which I kind of touched upon in last year's race that's quite decisive at Flanders, which is crashes. Yeah. Like anyone who's going to win this race, there's quite often with a lot of tight, twisty roads that you can only fit like 2-3 bikes across.
Yeah.
It's not unusual to see at least it's taken out in a crash at some point. And if it's raining, that makes that even more likely.
Yeah, so I mean, if it is going to be wet roads or there's a chance of bad weather, does that change your prediction of who you think could win? Are there any riders that you then think, nah, they're rubbish in bad weather? Or are there riders who you think, yeah, they're really good in bad weather?
I think earlier we talked about Ian Stannard as a man for Roubaix, but he's a guy who he doesn't love riding, and no one loves riding in wet weather.
I do.
Okay, well,
you're weird.
There's exceptions to that, but he's the sort of rider that is not put off by it, whereas someone like Philippe Pozzato, who was top 3 quite a few years ago, and is riding again this year, a bit of an outsider, might not be relishing wet conditions that much.
Yeah, and you might in the Van Avermaet Sagan axis, you might sort of say that tips it maybe towards Peter Sagan.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Good bike handler.
Good bike handling on wet cobbles is going to be a massively important attribute.
Definitely.
Yep.
So.
We've got another question coming in, going back to Peter Sagan. Simon Crossley says, has Sagan got too big for his boots?
I don't think he's grown recently. He's the same size.
Yeah.
So,
Has he gotten? Does he mean has he gotten cocky by that? I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know, but he does seem to have a lot of criticisms for other riders recently. He does seem to think that everyone, because they are riding in a negative way, because that's how you beat Peter Sagan, that they shouldn't be doing that. But it's
a bona fide tactic. It's been used for years, you know.
Yeah.
When I see Peter Sagan and Greg Van Avermaet, I think of and their rivalry. To me, it's a bit like Achilles and Hector in Greek mythology, because I think
it's quite a highfalutin comparison.
I know, but I think like Peter Sagan is this sort of demigod. He's just incredibly strong, and he's clearly the strongest. But he doesn't always win, because that's the beauty of cycling. But Greg Van Avermaet is this mortal that kind of takes him on and can beat him. But I think Peter Sagan's downfall is in some ways, that he is clearly the strongest. You see it at the end of these races.
Yeah.
He hasn't won the races last week, but he was so strong if you watched it, when he was making the moves. And
that's all, as we kind of said earlier, that's always been his sort of, if strength can be your Achilles heel, then that is the case with Peter Sagan.
But if everyone thinks he's the strongest, I mean, you look at the strength of the Quick Step team, for example. Is Sagan going to get marked out of the race, and how easy is it for them to mark him?
I mean, we're not another moving off the big favourites.
Yeah.
Another question coming in: who could be a dark horse for the podium?
Ooh, that's
who's you pick then?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I'm still going with Set Van.
I don't think someone who came third last year can be counted as a
okay.
That's a dark horse.
Fair enough. He's not a dark horse. That's a fair comment. Tej Benoot is a guy to watch.
You picked mine.
I picked yours.
I was going to say that.
You were going to say that. But he's someone to watch. Certainly.
He was 5th in 2015. So also sort of not really.
He's really young. I think it's
very young.
I mean, I don't know.
A future star in the making, I think.
Well, yeah,
he's done well this season as well. He's been in good form.
Yeah, and he's quite a slender and quite a small rider. So I think the continuous explosive climbs off Flanders could really suit him.
Yeah.
I'm going to go for Luke Durbridge. I mean,
he's been going well, isn't he?
Yeah, we're talking about the podium here. We're not talking about the win. So sorry, Luke, I'm not going to back you for the win. But so Luke Durbridge, before this season, didn't have any top 10s in cobbled races, and then got 4th in Tour of Flanders and 4th in E3. Didn't ride Ghent, but it looks in great form. Really strong time trialist. It's just whether those continuous explosive efforts, whether he'll be able to hang on over there, because he did. E3, I think he got dropped on the Quarmont, which was right at the end, and probably I think the last real climb on the course. So it's whether he can hang in there. But Orica Scott actually have a really strong team this year. Jens Koikelaar was 2nd in Ghent. Matt Heyman, obviously defending Paris-Roubaix champion. So they're not the sort of squad that you usually associate with classics, yeah. But they've got a few options. I think it could be really interesting to see how they play it.
There's another one worth a mention, actually. Having stolen yours, I'll give you another.
Steal
one.
my other one.
Yeah, sorry. What was your other one going to be?
I was going to say I'd like to see Degenkolb on the podium.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good shout.
He's sort of gradually been coming back to form after his unfortunate accident with a septuagenarian in Calpe, but he's starting to look good again, and he's got a sweet bike as well.
Very nice.
You've seen his bike. We've got a story of it online, so check it out. But he's got this cool custom Trek, and it's beautiful. So
I'm not sure about his nickname though. His nickname's Deggy.
That's a rubbish nickname.
I'm not sure about
that. That's taken all of 30 seconds, isn't it? No work's gone into that. The one I was going to mention as a possible outsider, if you can call him that, is Oliver Nason.
Yep.
He came 3rd at E3 this year. He was 6th at Dwars earlier, so he could potentially be there or thereabouts.
Yeah.
And you don't normally, again, similar thing with Orica, you don't normally think of AG2R as being a classic squad, but
good Oliver Nason stat. He's 3rd on Strava on the Eau de Quermont.
That begs the question of who's first and second.
I don't know who 2nd is, but 1st is Nicky Terpstra.
Yeah, okay. Well, there you go. So, I mean, that's pedigree if you...
if
3rd on Strava.
Well,
Third in Flanders. It's written.
Yeah.
Oliver Nason's actually got quite an interesting story. He turned pro at the age of 25, which is really late. He worked 12-hour shifts as a truck driver while he was trying to turn pro. So I think if anyone's got the motivation to win Flanders, then Oliver Nason certainly has.
That's got to be... Yeah, you don't normally associate truck drivers with athletic capability, so fair play to him.
Yeah. Also a training partner of Greg van Avermaet. So if anyone knows how to beat Greg van Avermaet,
it should be
Oliver Nason.
No.
There you go. So another question come in saying, how will Tom Boonen be remembered? So what do you reckon?
Well, I don't think this weekend is going to be the make or break of how Tom Boonen's remembered. I mean, obviously, if he wins this weekend, he becomes the only person to have 4 victories. But do we think that's very likely? I said earlier, I don't think that's terribly likely. But you know, he's one of the all-time classics greats. I mean, anything that I could say about Tom Boonen has probably been said 1,000 times by people in more poetic language before now. But he's definitely going to go down as one of the greats, not just the classics, but bike racing in general. Really.
Yeah, and what I want to see from a Tom Boonen fan perspective is for the race to be all together on the Tyenberg, which is with 27 kilometres remaining, also known as the Boonenberg, because always attacks on this climb. So what I would love is, well, not love, but a really boring race up to the Tyenberg. Everyone just sort of going around in the peloton, just waiting, and then Boonen just to light it up in the Tyenberg and it to be full on racing from there. He will attack on the climb, whether he's 20 minutes he'll do it. So that'll be. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see Tom Boonen attack on the Tyenberg and really light the race up.
That's you always guaranteed a bit of entertainment with Tom Boonen, I think.
Cool. Right. So final predictions before we go.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you who you think's gonna win. So, who is your money on, Henry?
I'm going to be really, really boring and say Greg van Avermaet. He's been, he's looked so strong in all of the preview races. He's attacked from a long way out. He's ridden hard again at Wevelgem. He's out sprinted people. I just can't see. I can't see him at least being up there. I think he'll win it, I have to say.
Yeah, no, that's a fair shout. Well, I mean, I feel almost obliged to say Peter Sagan if Henry's going to say Greg van Avermaet.
It's going to be really boring here, aren't we?
Yeah, it is quite boring. But I mean, I think it's easy to sort of not want to look further down the sort of order of favourites and pick a side. But there's a reason those two are at the top. And if you're going to make a prediction, unfortunately, it probably has to be one of those two. And while Sagan hasn't had the run of wins coming into this race that Van Avermaet's had, he's been there or thereabouts, and Peter Sagan, who's there or thereabouts, is capable of winning on any given day, really.
So we're saying Greg van Avermaet and Sagan are the 2 outstanding favourites. So
yeah.
Ollie,
you're going to have to go for someone a bit more interesting.
Okay.
Some things.
Well, to sort of para-quote R. Kelly, my mind's telling me Sagan. But my body is going to say Gilbert. We'll go with Gilbert.
Oh, that's
I'd love to see Gilbert.
That's so boring.
I'd love to see
Gilbert. For the 3 top ones.
Yeah.
Or Set Van Mark.
No. Or Steve Hart.
Let's call it a day there, shall we?
Cool. All right. Thanks. And we'll join you next time, which I think will be our Paris-Roubaix preview.
Can't wait.
It's going to be good.
Yeah. Fantastic.
See you later.
Cheers.